My name is Melanie Wilson, 29 years old, and I never imagined coming home from a business trip to find every possession I owned scattered across our front lawn. The shock turned to rage when I discovered a note pinned to my favorite sweater: "If you want to stay here, live in the basement." After my father died, my stepbrother Derek and stepsister Amanda clearly decided it was time to show me where I stood in the family hierarchy. What they didn't know was the secret my father and I had kept for years. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear what happened when they showed up at my door 6 months later. To understand how I ended up collecting my soaked belongings from the lawn that rainy April afternoon, you need to know about my family. I grew up in that 2-story colonial house on Maple Street, raised by my dad, Richard, after my mom died from cancer when I was just 4 years old. For 8 years, it was just the two of us, and those were the happiest days of my childhood. Dad built his construction business from nothing into one of the most successful firms in our city, but he always made time for me. We had movie nights every Friday, pancake breakfasts on Sundays, and he never missed a single school event. Everything changed when I turned 12 and Dad married Diane. She seemed nice enough during their courtship, bringing me little gifts and pretending to be interested in my hobbies. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags when her attention immediately dropped after the wedding. She moved into our home with her 2 children from a previous marriage, Derek, who was 14 at the time, and Amanda, who was 10. From day one, there was an invisible line drawn in our house. Diane doted on her biological children while merely tolerating me. At dinner, Derek and Amanda would get seconds before I finished my first serving. On birthdays, they received lavish parties while mine was often forgotten until Dad came home and insisted on a last-minute celebration. When Christmas came around, the gift pile disparity was so obvious that neighbors would comment on it. Dad tried his best to compensate, often bringing me special presents when he returned from business trips or taking me out for daddy-daughter dates. This only made Diane resent me more, treating these moments as evidence that I was trying to steal her husband's attention from her real family. Despite the tension at home, my father and I maintained a close relationship. When I turned 16, he started teaching me about business and financial management. "Melanie," he'd say, "knowledge about money is freedom. Never forget that." He opened a small investment account in my name and taught me how to grow it, explaining stocks, bonds, and real estate with a patience that made complex concepts understandable. By the time I left for college at 18, the account had grown significantly. I chose a university 3 hours away, partly for its excellent business program and partly to escape the daily tension at home. Still, I called Dad twice a week and came home monthly to see him, usually timing my visits when Diane and her kids were away visiting her parents. During my senior year of college, Dad's construction company landed several major contracts, and his wealth grew substantially. He expanded into commercial real estate and even began developing a small luxury apartment building downtown. He would show me the plans during my visits home, explaining his vision for creating not just apartments, but a community. "It's not just about building structures, Melanie," he'd say. "It's about building places where life happens." After graduation, I got a job at a marketing firm in the city and rented a small apartment with my college roommate. Though I could have afforded my own place thanks to the investment account Dad had helped me build, I was saving for a down payment on a house of my own. Besides, living with a roommate made the transition to working life less lonely. Then, 3 years ago, the unthinkable happened. Dad called me on a random Tuesday and asked if I could meet him for lunch. His voice sounded off, but he insisted everything was fine. When I arrived at our favorite restaurant, I knew immediately something was wrong. His normally robust complexion was pale, and he'd lost weight. "Pancreatic cancer," he said before I could even ask. "Stage 4. The world tilted on its axis as he explained that it had been discovered too late for effective treatment. The doctors had given him 6 months to a year. He lived for 8 months. During that time, I cut back my hours at work and spent as much time with him as possible. Diane, to her credit, seemed genuinely devastated, though Derek and Amanda were oddly detached, more concerned about their inheritance than their stepfather's suffering. A month before he died, Dad asked me to meet him at his office without telling anyone. There, he handed me a small box containing a key and some documents. "I've made arrangements," he said, his once strong voice now barely above a whisper. "The house will go to Diane, with the understanding that all 3 of you kids can live there if you need to. But I know how they treat you when I'm not looking, sweetheart. So I've created something just for you. When the time is right, use this key." After Dad passed, the will reading confirmed what he'd told me. The family house went to Diane, along with a significant life insurance policy. Derek and Amanda received trust funds that would pay out when they turned 30. As for me, I received a portion of Dad's business interests, to be managed by his longtime business partner until I felt ready to take a more active role. What wasn't mentioned in the will was whatever the mysterious key opened. I kept it on a chain around my neck, waiting for the right time, as Dad had instructed. For 2 years after Dad's death, I continued living in the family home, mainly out of a sense of obligation and to keep an eye on Diane, whose health began declining shortly after Dad's passing. I paid rent to contribute to household expenses, though I learned later I was paying far more than my fair share. Derek, now working as a manager at a retail store, and Amanda, who jumped between various entry-level jobs, contributed minimally while treating the house as their personal domain. As Diane's health deteriorated, she became more dependent on her biological children, who used this to solidify their control over household decisions. The tension grew, with snide comments evolving into outright hostility. Still, I persisted, believing that honoring Dad's wish for family unity was worth the discomfort. Then came my business trip to San Francisco. After 3 years at the marketing firm, I had been promoted to senior consultant, handling major client accounts. This particular trip was to finalize a contract with a tech company that would be our firm's biggest client to date. The 2-week trip had gone exceptionally well, with the contract signed and a celebratory dinner with the client's executives on the final night. I flew home with a sense of accomplishment, completely unaware that my stepfamily had been plotting during my absence. As the taxi pulled up to our house, I couldn't possibly have imagined what awaited me on the front lawn. The taxi driver was the first to notice something was wrong. "Hey, miss, is that your stuff on the lawn?" he asked as we pulled up to the house. I looked out the window, momentarily confused by what I was seeing. Clothes, books, electronics, and furniture, my furniture from my bedroom, were scattered across the front yard like the aftermath of a tornado. "There must be some mistake," I mumbled, paying the driver and stepping out into the light rain that had just begun to fall. My heart pounded as I approached the lawn, picking up a waterlogged photo album containing pictures of my dad and me. Water damage had already begun to warp the pages, causing the images to blur like my own vision as tears formed. I picked up a soggy cardboard box containing office supplies and found the note taped to it. "If you want to stay here, live in the basement. Otherwise, take your stuff and leave. D. and As I stood there, paralyzed by shock, the front door opened. Derek stepped out, arms crossed, with Amanda hovering behind him, a smug smile on her face. "About time you showed up," Derek said. "We were wondering if we'd have to call someone to clear all this junk away. What is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Why is my stuff outside? Where's Diane?" Amanda stepped forward. "Mom decided she needs more care than we can provide at home. She's moving to a care facility next month, and we're converting this place into a duplex. Derek will take the main floor and I'll take the upper level. And you can have the basement if you want," Derek added with a cruel smile. "It's unfinished, but we figure you can fix it up. Or you can just leave. Your choice. This is insane, I said, looking around at my belongings getting progressively soaked in the increasing rainfall. I live here too. I pay rent. You can't just throw me out. Actually, we can, Amanda replied. The house is in Mom's name, and she's given us power of attorney over her affairs. She agrees the arrangement needs to change. I highly doubted Diane had agreed to anything of the sort. Her declining health had made her increasingly confused, and I suspected Derek and Amanda were taking advantage of her condition. I want to speak to Diane, I insisted, attempting to move past them into the house. Derek blocked my path. She's resting and doesn't want to be disturbed. Especially not by you. She's tired of you living off her charity. Charity? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I pay $1,200 a month in rent. I contribute to utilities and groceries. If anyone's living off charity, it's you too. Whatever. Amanda waved her hand dismissively. The decision's been made. You have until tonight to either move your stuff into the basement or take it elsewhere. Anything left on the lawn tomorrow goes to the dump. The humiliation intensified as I noticed our neighbors watching from their windows and porches. Mrs. Carlson from next door was on her front steps, phone in hand, clearly having witnessed the entire confrontation. Further down the street, a group of teenagers had stopped their bikes to watch the drama unfold. As if the public humiliation wasn't enough, I soon discovered that some of my most valuable possessions were missing. My laptop, which contained all my work files, was nowhere to be found. The antique jewelry box my father had given me for my 16th birthday was also missing, along with the few pieces of my mother's jewelry I had inherited. Where's my laptop? And my jewelry box? I demanded. Derek shrugged. No idea. Maybe they're in one of the boxes. Or maybe they got misplaced during the move. Things happen. The casual cruelty in his tone made it clear that the misplacement had been intentional. I later found my laptop in the garden shed. The screen cracked and the hard drive mysteriously removed. As I frantically tried to gather my most important possessions before they were completely ruined by the rain, Amanda followed me around the lawn. You know, I never understood why Richard kept you around after your mom died, she said, her voice dripping with venom. He should have sent you to live with your real family instead of forcing my mom to raise another woman's kid. Her words stung, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. My dad was my real family, I replied, keeping my voice steady. And this house was our home long before you moved in. Well, it's our home now, she shot back. And you're not family. You never were. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend, Caitlin. She answered on the second ring. Hey Mel, how is San Fran? Kate, I cut her off, my voice finally breaking. I need a place to stay. They've thrown all my stuff on the lawn and locked me out. What? Who did? Derek and Amanda? Are you serious? Her outrage was palpable even through the phone. Get over here right now. I'll help you move your things. Those absolute monsters. While I waited for Caitlin to arrive, I continued gathering what I could. Derek stood on the porch, watching me with obvious satisfaction. By the way, he called out, we expect you to keep contributing to the household expenses if you take the basement option. In fact, since you're doing so well at your job, we think $2,000 a month would be more appropriate. I stared at him in disbelief. You throw my belongings onto the lawn, damage my property, and still expect me to pay you? You're delusional. His expression darkened. Listen carefully, Melanie. My mother has spent years putting up with you because Richard insisted. Now that he's gone, things are going to be different. You'll either play by our rules or get out completely. And if you choose to leave, don't think about contesting anything in court. We have documentation showing Mom's wishes, and as her biological children, we'll always have more standing than you. I felt a cold clarity wash over me as I realized the depth of their betrayal. They had been planning this for months, possibly years, waiting for the right moment to strike. My business trip had provided the perfect opportunity. When Caitlin arrived, she jumped out of her car and immediately began helping me gather my rain-soaked possessions. "I can't believe they would do this," she fumed as we loaded boxes into her car. "This is beyond cruel." "Apparently, it's been a long time coming," I replied, my initial shock giving way to a quiet anger that burned deep in my chest. As we worked, I reached inside my shirt and felt the key that had hung around my neck since my father gave it to me. Perhaps this was the right time he had spoken of. By the time we finished loading Caitlin's car and my small sedan with what we could salvage, night had fallen. Much of what had been on the lawn earliest was beyond saving: waterlogged books, ruined electronics, clothing stained by mud and grass. As we drove away, I looked back at the house where I had grown up, now foreign and hostile, and made a decision. I would never allow myself to be victimized by them again. After dropping off my salvaged belongings at Caitlin's apartment, I sat on her couch wrapped in a blanket, staring at the mysterious key I'd worn around my neck for 3 years. It was an unusual key, not the kind that would open a typical house door or padlock. It looked more like it belonged to a high-security building. "I think it's time to find out what this opens," I told Caitlin, finally sharing the story of my father's mysterious gift. Attached to the keyring was a small metal tag with a series of numbers and letters, 1402 R. My father's documents included a business card for the Riverside Residences, the luxury apartment building downtown that my father had developed in his final years. "You don't think?" Caitlin's eyes widened. I nodded slowly. Only one way to find out. The next morning, I drove to the Riverside Residences, an elegant 20-story building with a doorman and a marble-floored lobby. My heart pounded as I approached the front desk, half expecting to be turned away. "Good morning," I said to the concierge, a distinguished older gentleman with silver hair. "My name is Melanie Wilson. I believe my father, Richard Wilson, may have left something for me here." The concierge's expression changed immediately upon hearing my name. "Ms. Wilson, we've been wondering when you would visit us. Your father spoke of you often during construction." He extended his hand. "I'm Walter, the head concierge. Your father was an extraordinary man." Walter made a quick call, and moments later, the building manager appeared, a woman in her 50s named Patricia. "Ms. Wilson, what a pleasure to finally meet you," she said warmly. "Your father told me you might come someday. He said to give you this when you arrived." She handed me an envelope with my name written in my father's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I opened it and began to read. "My dearest Melanie, if you're reading this, then the time has come for you to use the key I gave you. I've always known that after I'm gone, your life in that house might become untenable. Diane tries, but her loyalty will always be to her own children first, and they have never hidden their resentment of you. So I've prepared a place where you can always feel secure and at home. The Riverside Residences was my final project, and I put my heart into it. Apartment 1402 is yours, purchased outright, with property taxes and HOA fees prepaid for the next 10 years. The R stands for Riverside, but also for Richard, a little piece of me watching over you. I hope you won't need this place immediately after I'm gone. I hope the family I tried to build will hold together. But I've always believed in preparing for all possibilities. This is your sanctuary, Melanie. No one can take it from you. All my love, Dad." Tears streamed down my face as Patricia handed me tissues. He was quite specific about the apartment. She explained gently. He personally oversaw every detail of the design and furnishing. Walter offered to escort me upstairs. We rode the elevator to the 14th floor, and he led me to a door marked 1402. "Welcome home, Ms. Wilson," he said as I inserted the key into the lock. The door swung open to reveal a stunning apartment that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased panoramic views of the city and the river beyond. The morning sunlight streamed in, illuminating a beautifully furnished living room with hardwood floors and modern, comfortable furniture. I walked through the apartment in a daze. The kitchen featured high-end appliances and stone countertops. The dining area had a table for 6, suggesting my father had imagined me entertaining friends here. The master bedroom included a walk-in closet and an en-suite bathroom with a soaking tub. A second bedroom had been set up as a home office, with a desk positioned to enjoy the view while working. What struck me most was how personal everything felt. The color scheme featured blues and greens, my favorites. The bookshelves contained many of my preferred authors, along with photographs of Dad and me throughout the years. On the desk in the office sat a framed picture of us at my college graduation, both beaming with pride. "Your father spent weeks selecting everything," Walter explained. "He said he wanted it to feel like home from the moment you walked in." In the master bedroom closet, I found women's clothing in exactly my size, nothing flashy. Just high-quality basics that matched my style perfectly. In the refrigerator and pantry, I discovered they were stocked with non-perishable items and basics. My father had truly thought of everything. As Walter prepared to leave me to explore on my own, he handed me a building information packet. There's a residence directory, information about amenities, and all the contact numbers you might need. The building has a gym, pool, and community room on the 3rd floor. We host monthly social events for residents if you're interested. Alone in the apartment, my apartment, I sat on the couch and allowed myself to fully process what had happened. My father, knowing how vulnerable I might become after his death, had created this sanctuary for me. Yet I had continued living in the family home out of some misplaced sense of obligation, enduring increasing hostility while this beautiful space waited for me. That afternoon, I returned to Caitlin's apartment to retrieve my salvaged belongings. "I have my own place," I told her, still somewhat in disbelief. "My dad bought me an apartment before he died." "What? That's incredible," she exclaimed. "But why didn't you move there right after he passed?" I shook my head, asking myself the same question. I guess I felt I needed to try to maintain the family he married into. I thought that's what he would have wanted. But he clearly anticipated this exact situation, Caitlin pointed out. He knew them better than you gave him credit for. Over the next few days, I worked on setting up my new life. I went dumpster diving behind the family house when Derek and Amanda were at work, rescuing more of my belongings they had thrown away. Some items were beyond saving, but I managed to recover photo albums, important documents, and sentimental objects that had been discarded. During one of these recovery missions, I discovered a waterproof container in the garden shed containing backup files for my work computer, something I had created but forgotten about. This saved me from losing critical client information and allowed me to continue working despite the destruction of my laptop. The strangest part of this transition was realizing I had been paying rent to live in the family home while owning a luxury apartment outright. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had been financially supporting people who had treated me with such contempt. A week after moving into the Riverside, I met with Harold Greenfield, my father's longtime attorney. I had found his business card among the documents my father had left me. "I was wondering when you'd call," Harold said when we met at his office. "Your father asked me to wait for you to come to me rather than seeking you out. He said you'd know when it was time." Harold explained that beyond the apartment, my father had left me more than I realized. I owned 40% of his construction company, with the remaining 60% divided between his business partner and a few key employees. The company had continued to thrive after his death, generating significant dividends that had been accumulating in an account in my name. Additionally, I discovered that many of the household expenses for the family home, mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, utilities had been automatically paid from business accounts my father had established. These payments were technically part of my inheritance, and I had full authority to redirect or cancel them. Your father set it up this way to ensure everyone would be taken care of, Harold explained. But he was explicit that these arrangements could be modified at your discretion if circumstances changed. I left Harold's office with a new understanding of my financial position and a plan forming in my mind. I wouldn't cut off all support immediately. That seemed unnecessarily cruel, especially to Diane, who was genuinely ill. But I would begin a strategic withdrawal that would force Derek and Amanda to take financial responsibility for themselves. That night, in my beautiful apartment overlooking the city lights, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my father's illness. Peace. As I drifted off to sleep in my new home, I felt as though my father was still watching over me, having provided exactly what I needed exactly when I needed it most. The Monday after discovering my apartment, I met again with Harold to implement my financial strategy. I want to understand exactly what household expenses I'm currently paying for, I told him. Harold pulled up detailed records on his computer. The business accounts are covering the mortgage payment of $3,200 monthly, property taxes quarterly, homeowners insurance annually, and utilities averaging $600 monthly. Additionally, there's a household expense account that receives $2,500 monthly for groceries and maintenance. I was stunned by the total. So the business, which is 40% mine, is paying over $7,000 a month to maintain a house where I'm no longer welcome, and on top of that, I was paying them $1,200 in rent. Harold nodded grimly. Your father wanted to ensure everyone was taken care of. He couldn't have anticipated they would force you out. What about Diane's medical expenses? Those are covered separately through the insurance policy Richard purchased. That's not connected to the household accounts. I thought carefully about my next steps. Here's what I want to do. First, immediately stop my rent payments. That's obvious. Second, I want to redirect my 40% of the business profits to my personal accounts rather than the household fund. Third, let's create a 3-month phased reduction of the household support. Harold took notes as I outlined my plan. Month 1 would maintain current mortgage and utility payments, but reduce the household expense account by half. Month 2 would reduce mortgage and utility contributions by 50%. Month 3 would end all payments except a small stipend specifically for Diane's personal needs that would go directly to her care providers, not Derek or Amanda. This gives them time to adjust. I explained. They'll need to either find ways to cover these expenses themselves or make other living arrangements. That seems more than fair, Harold agreed. Most people in your position would cut everything off immediately after what they did. I'm not doing this out of vindictiveness, I clarified. I just need to establish boundaries and independence. And honestly, continuing to financially support them would only enable their behavior. With my financial plan in motion, I turned my attention to rebuilding my life. My apartment at the Riverside was already fully furnished, but I needed to replace damaged electronics and personal items. The business dividends Harold had redirected to me provided more than enough funds for these purchases. I bought a new laptop, set up a proper home office in the second bedroom, and began establishing a routine. Without the daily tension of the family house, I found myself more productive and creative in my work. I extended my client base and even began considering starting my own marketing consultancy rather than remaining with my firm. Living at the Riverside opened up a new social world as well. The building truly was a community, just as my father had envisioned. I met Robert and Elaine Johnson, a retired couple in their 70s who lived next door in 1403. They invited me for dinner during my first week, sharing stories about my father during the building's construction. Richard spoke about you constantly, Elaine told me over homemade lasagna. He would show us your pictures and tell us about your accomplishments. He was so proud of you. Across the hall in 1401 lived Jasmine Chin, a pediatric surgeon in her mid-30s who worked long hours but always made time for the building's social events. We quickly developed a friendship based on our similar work ethics and shared love of true crime podcasts. On the 12th floor, I met Michael Reeves, a 32-year-old architect who had actually worked with my father on designing the Riverside. Our first conversation in the elevator turned into coffee in the building's ground floor cafe, which turned into regular morning runs along the riverfront path. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building connections based on mutual respect and genuine interest rather than obligation or shared history. The contrast between my new life and the tension-filled years at the family house couldn't have been more stark. 3 weeks after moving into the Riverside, I received the first indication that my financial strategy was having an effect. My phone lit up with Derek's name, a call I declined. Minutes later, a text arrived. The mortgage company sent a late payment notice. What's going on with Dad's business? Call me ASAP. I waited until the following day to respond, then called him from my office during my lunch break. Why is the mortgage late? He demanded without even a hello. Hello to you too, Derek, I replied calmly. I've redirected my portion of the business proceeds to my personal accounts. I'm no longer contributing to household expenses. You can't do that, he exploded. That money is for the house. Actually, I can. I own 40% of the business, and I have every right to receive my share of the profits directly. Dad's arrangement was contingent on me living there, which is no longer the case since you threw my belongings onto the lawn. We didn't, he sputtered. Where are you living anyway? That's not your concern, I replied. What is your concern is figuring out how you and Amanda are going to cover the mortgage and other expenses. I've arranged for payments to continue at a reduced rate for the next 2 months to give you time to adjust, but after that, you're on your own. The stream of obscenities that followed told me everything I needed to know about Derek's financial planning skills. I ended the call mid-tirade, blocked his number, and returned to my work with a strange sense of calm. Amanda's response came through social media, where she posted a thinly veiled attack calling me a selfish, ungrateful stepsister who had abandoned family in their time of need. Several mutual acquaintances contacted me privately, asking what had happened. I provided a simple, factual account without embellishment, including a photo of my belongings on the lawn. The tide of public opinion quickly turned against Derek and Amanda. As the weeks passed, I established security measures at my apartment building. I provided Walter and the security team with Derek and Amanda's photos and instructions not to allow them entry under any circumstances. I set up mail forwarding and made sure no public records connected me to the Riverside. While I didn't think they would go to extreme lengths to find me, their reaction to the financial changes suggested they weren't above harassment. By the end of the first month in my new home, I felt more settled and secure than I had since before my father's death. I had transformed the second bedroom into a fully functional home office, joined the building's fitness center and swimming pool, and begun attending the monthly resident socials. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset reflect off the river, I realized something profound. This apartment wasn't just a physical space my father had provided. It was the embodiment of his love and foresight. He had created not just a home for me, but a foundation from which I could build a new life on my own terms. For the first time since his passing, I felt truly at peace with his absence, knowing that in his own way, he was still taking care of me. 3 months after moving into the Riverside, my life had undergone a complete transformation. I had left my marketing firm and established my own consultancy, Wilson Creative Solutions, working primarily from my home office with occasional client meetings in the building's business center. The freedom of self-employment allowed me to select clients I genuinely enjoyed working with and projects that challenged me creatively. My social circle had expanded beyond just neighbors to include other entrepreneurs I met through networking events and former colleagues who had followed me to my new venture. Michael and I had progressed from running buddies to dating, taking things slowly but enjoying the natural chemistry between us. While my life flourished, news about my stepfamily trickled in through mutual acquaintances. The first significant update came from Mrs. Carlson, our former neighbor, who had always been kind to me. She called one afternoon, concerned. "Melanie, I hope you don't mind me reaching out," she began. "I thought you should know there's a past due notice on your family's door. It looks serious." This wasn't surprising given that my financial support had been significantly reduced by this point, but it confirmed that Derek and Amanda hadn't managed to replace the lost income. A week later, I ran into a former colleague whose wife worked at the retail chain where Derek was employed. "Did you hear Derek lost his job?" he asked. Apparently, he was caught taking extended lunch breaks and coming in late repeatedly. His boss said his attitude had become unbearable, snapping at customers and blaming subordinates for his mistakes. Amanda's situation wasn't any better. According to social media posts viewed by mutual friends, she had been job hopping with increasing frequency, never lasting more than a few weeks at any position. Her Instagram still showed shopping sprees and expensive restaurant meals, suggesting she was financing her lifestyle through credit cards rather than income. The most comprehensive update came from Harold, who still monitored the household accounts as part of our phased withdrawal strategy. "The mortgage is now 60 days past due," he informed me during our monthly check-in. "Property taxes for the quarter weren't paid, and there are outstanding utility bills. Also, their car was repossessed last week." "What about Diane?" I asked, genuinely concerned about my stepmother's well-being despite our complicated relationship. "Her medical insurance is separate and remains intact," Harold assured me. "However, I've received notifications that her prescriptions haven't been consistently filled. It appears Derek and Amanda may be neglecting her care to some degree." This troubled me deeply. Diane had never been particularly warm toward me, but she didn't deserve neglect in her illness. After consulting with Harold, I arranged for a separate account specifically for Diane's non-medical needs, personal items, comfort measures, and prescriptions that would be administered directly by her healthcare providers without Derek and Amanda's knowledge or access. As the fourth month began, the calls started. First from unknown numbers that I didn't answer, then from friends' phones they had clearly borrowed. I declined them all but listened to the voicemails. "Melanie, it's Derek. This has gone far enough. The bank is threatening foreclosure. You need to restart the payments immediately. This is what Dad would have wanted." "Hey, it's Amanda. Using Jen's phone since you've blocked mine. Look, we can work something out about you moving back. The basement isn't so bad, and we're family after all. Call me back." Their increasing desperation was evident in each message, but noticeably absent was any acknowledgement of their behavior or apology for how they had treated me. They viewed me solely as a financial resource, not as a person deserving of respect or family consideration. By the fifth month, things had deteriorated further. Harold reported that utility shut-off notices had been posted at the house, first the cable and internet, then the electricity with warnings about water to follow. The mortgage was now officially in default, with foreclosure proceedings initiated by the bank. I maintained my distance and my silence, focusing instead on building my business and my new life. The consulting firm was thriving, with client recommendations bringing in more work than I could handle alone. I hired a part-time assistant and was considering bringing on a second consultant to manage the overflow. My relationship with Michael deepened as we discovered shared values and complementary temperaments. He understood my complicated family situation without judgment, having navigated his own challenging family dynamics after his parents' divorce. One evening over dinner in my apartment, Michael asked the question I'd been contemplating myself. "Do you ever feel guilty about what's happening to them?" I considered my answer carefully. I've asked myself that same question many times. But here's the thing, I'm not causing their situation. I'm simply no longer preventing the natural consequences of their choices. They're adults who need to take responsibility for themselves. That's a healthy perspective, he nodded. It's not about revenge. It's about boundaries. Exactly. And honestly, if they had treated me with basic decency, even if they'd just let me collect my belongings properly instead of throwing them on the lawn, I probably would have continued supporting them financially out of respect for my dad's wishes. They created this situation, not me. As the 6th month approached, Harold informed me that foreclosure on the family home was now inevitable. The bank has scheduled an auction for next month, he explained. Derek and Amanda have made no arrangements for alternative housing as far as I can tell. I felt a momentary pang at the thought of losing my childhood home, but recognized it as nostalgia for a time before Diane and her children entered our lives. The house had stopped being a true home for me long ago. That same week, I received an anonymous tip from someone claiming to be a friend of Amanda's. They hired a private investigator to find you. They're desperate and blaming you for everything. Be careful. Whether the warning was legitimate or not, I increased security measures at my building. I informed Walter and the security team to be especially vigilant, updated my privacy settings on all accounts, and made sure my home office address, listed on business documents, was actually a secure P.O. box. 6 months to the day after I found my belongings on the lawn, I was returning from a business dinner with a new client. The meeting had gone exceptionally well, with a contract signed for a 6-month marketing campaign that would significantly expand my company's portfolio. As I approached the riverside, feeling satisfied with how my life had evolved, I had no idea that Derek and Amanda were waiting in the lobby, ready to make one final, desperate attempt to exploit what they still viewed as their familial claim on my resources. The Riverside's elegant lobby, normally a peaceful transition space between the bustling city and the tranquility of home, felt instantly different as I pushed through the revolving door that evening. Walter, usually stationed behind the concierge desk with a warm greeting, was standing in conversation with 2 security guards, his posture tense. Then I saw why. Derek and Amanda were seated in the waiting area, looking significantly worse for wear than when I'd last seen them. Derek's usually meticulous appearance had deteriorated. His unshaven face and wrinkled clothing suggested someone under significant stress. Amanda, always fashionable to a fault, wore jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual designer outfits. Her carefully maintained highlights had grown out, showing dark roots. They spotted me before I could retreat back through the revolving door. "Melanie," Derek called out, both of them rushing toward me. The security guards immediately moved to intercept them. "Ms. Wilson, these individuals claim to be your family," Walter said. "They've been waiting for nearly 3 hours. I was about to call you." "It's all right, Walter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'll speak with them briefly in the lobby only." The guards maintained positions nearby as we moved to a seating area, far enough from other residents for privacy, but close enough to the security desk for safety. "So this is where you've been hiding," Derek said, looking around the marble-floored lobby with undisguised envy. "Nice upgrade from the house you abandoned." "I didn't abandon anything," I replied calmly. "I was thrown out, remember? My belongings on the lawn?" The charming note about the basement. Amanda at least had the decency to look momentarily embarrassed. "That was a mistake. We were upset about Mom's health declining and took it out on you." "How did you find me?" I asked, ignoring her half-hearted attempt at justification. Derek shifted uncomfortably. "We hired someone. Cost us a fortune we don't have, but we needed to find you before." He stopped abruptly. "Before what?" I pressed. Amanda jumped in. "Before we lose the house. The foreclosure auction is next week. We have nowhere to go, Melanie. Mom's being moved to a state facility because we can't afford the private care anymore." "I'm sorry to hear about Diane," I said, genuinely concerned. "But I've been ensuring her medical needs are covered separately." The financial issues with the house are not my responsibility. Of course, they're your responsibility. Derek snapped, loud enough that the security guards took a step closer. He lowered his voice. Dad wanted that house to support all of us. You've deliberately cut us off. Dad wanted us to be a family, I corrected him. That included treating each other with respect. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't worthy of basic decency. Amanda leaned forward, adopting the sweet tone she reserved for manipulation. We made a mistake, Mel. We were grieving and stressed. But we're still family. Dad would want us to stick together. Don't you dare invoke my father to manipulate me, I said quietly. You never respected him when he was alive, and you certainly haven't honored his memory since he died. Derek changed tactics. Look, we know you have this place now. It's huge for one person. We could all live here, help each other out. I could get a job nearby, and Amanda could help with housekeeping. The audacity of their proposal left me momentarily speechless. After throwing me out of the family home, they now expected to move into my private sanctuary? The entitlement was breathtaking. That's not going to happen, I stated firmly. My home is not available to you. You selfish bitch, Derek hissed, his friendly facade crumbling instantly. You're living in luxury while we're about to be homeless. Is that what Dad would have wanted? What Dad wanted, I replied evenly, was for me to be safe and secure regardless of how his second family treated me. That's why he bought this apartment without telling any of you. He knew exactly who you were, even if he hoped for better. Amanda's eyes narrowed. We're not leaving without something. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I stated. Every bill I paid after Dad died, every household expense I contributed to, every rent check I wrote, those were choices I made out of respect for him. Not obligation to you. Derek stood suddenly. Then we'll take what we're owed. Your precious daddy left you everything while we got nothing. We're just balancing the scales. He moved toward the elevators, clearly intending to force his way up to my apartment. Amanda quickly followed. The security team responded immediately, blocking their path. You're not residents and you don't have authorized access, one guard stated firmly. She's my stepsister. That's my family apartment too. Derek shouted, trying to push past. Sir, step back now or we'll be forced to remove you from the premises, the second guard warned. Derek, never one to back down when cornered, made the mistake of shoving the guard. Within seconds, both security officers had restrained him, while Walter calmly picked up the phone to call the police. Amanda began crying dramatically. Melanie, please. Tell them to let him go. We have nowhere else to turn. Despite everything, seeing their desperation gave me no satisfaction. Derek, Amanda, this isn't the way. If you leave peacefully now, I won't press charges. Derek, still restrained but no longer struggling, glared at me with pure hatred. This isn't over. You think you're so much better than us, but you're nothing. Richard only favored you because he felt guilty about your pathetic mother dying. The cruel comment was designed to wound me deeply, but instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity. This person, this angry, entitled man, had never been and would never be family to me, regardless of our parents' marriage. Walter, please show them out, I said quietly, and update their photos in the security system. They are not to be admitted under any circumstances. As the guards escorted Derek and Amanda toward the exit, several of my neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation approached me. Jasmine from across the hall put her arm around my shoulders. Robert and Elaine, the elderly couple next door, stood nearby offering supportive smiles. Those people seemed terrible, Jasmine said. Are you okay? I will be, I replied, watching as my step-siblings were escorted out the front doors. Derek still shouting threats and Amanda still crying. Back in my apartment, I called Harold to inform him of the confrontation and inquire about additional security measures. He suggested a formal restraining order, which I agreed to pursue immediately. Also, he added, given their current desperation, You might want to be cautious about any financial accounts or documents they might have access to. They could attempt identity theft or other forms of fraud. I spent the evening securing my financial accounts, changing passwords, and setting up additional verification steps. As I worked, my phone continuously lit up with messages from unknown numbers, presumably Derek and Amanda, using friends' phones again, which I declined and blocked one by one. Later that night, as I tried to sleep, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had led to this point. 3 years ago, I had been determined to maintain family harmony at any cost, believing that's what my father would have wanted. Now I understood that what he truly wanted was for me to be strong enough to protect myself when necessary. The confrontation in the lobby had been unpleasant, but ultimately clarifying. Derek and Amanda had shown their true colors not just to me, but to my new community. In their effort to invade my sanctuary, they had only reinforced why I needed it in the first place. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt oddly at peace. Tomorrow would bring the formal restraining order process, additional security consultations, and likely more desperate attempts at contact from Derek and Amanda. But for the first time, I felt fully equipped to handle whatever came next. My father had given me not just a physical home, but the tools to build boundaries and the courage to maintain them. The restraining order was granted without contest 2 weeks after the lobby confrontation. Derek and Amanda didn't even appear for the hearing, perhaps finally recognizing the futility of their efforts or simply unable to afford the legal representation. The court order legally prohibited them from contacting me, coming within 500 feet of my residence or workplace, or attempting to reach me through third parties. With this legal protection in place, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The constant vigilance of the past 6 months could finally ease, allowing me to focus fully on building my future rather than defending against my past. Through Harold, I arranged for Diane to receive proper care. Without informing Derek and Amanda, I established a trust that would pay directly to a quality nursing facility, ensuring she would receive the attention she needed regardless of her children's financial situation. While our relationship had been strained, she was still my father's widow, and I knew he would have wanted her well cared for. The house was auctioned yesterday, Harold informed me during our monthly meeting. It sold for less than market value, which is typical for foreclosures, but enough to settle the outstanding mortgage. Did Derek and Amanda find somewhere to live? I asked, not out of obligation, but simple human concern. Harold nodded. Derek is staying with a friend temporarily. Amanda moved in with a boyfriend. Neither has stable employment from what I can gather. I felt no satisfaction in their struggles, only a sense of inevitability. Their financial collapse wasn't my victory. It was the natural consequence of their choices and behavior patterns established long before our final break. With the family home sold and the restraining order in place, the last tangible connections to my stepfamily were severed. I felt a curious mixture of relief and momentary sadness, not for what was lost, but for what had never truly existed, the blended family my father had hoped to create. My own life continued to flourish in ways I could scarcely have imagined a year earlier. Wilson Creative Solutions had grown to include 3 full-time employees besides myself, necessitating a small office space in addition to my home setup. We specialized in marketing for small businesses and startups, bringing the expertise of larger agencies to companies that couldn't typically afford such services. My relationship with Michael deepened as well. 6 months after our first date, he moved into my apartment, bringing his architectural drawings and jazz record collection to complement my marketing books and true crime podcasts. We established routines and traditions that strengthened our bond: Sunday brunches on the balcony, Wednesday night cooking experiments, Friday movie debates. The Riverside community became an extended family. Jasmine, Robert, Elaine, and other neighbors formed a support network unlike anything I'd experienced in the family home. We celebrated birthdays and holidays together, watched each other's apartments during vacations, and created the warm, accepting environment I had always craved. On the anniversary of my father's death, I visited his grave alone. The cemetery was peaceful in the early morning light, dew still clinging to the grass as I placed fresh flowers beside his headstone. "You were right, Dad," I said softly. "About everything. About them, about what I would need. About preparing for the future." I traced the engraved letters of his name. "I wish you could see how things turned out. I think you'd be proud. Not just of the business success, but of how I finally learned to value myself the way you always valued me." A gentle breeze rustled the nearby trees, and I allowed myself to imagine it was his response. In that quiet moment, I felt a sense of completion, as though a circle had closed. The pain of his loss would never fully disappear, but it had transformed into something gentler, a bittersweet appreciation for the foresight and love that continued to shape my life even in his absence. That evening, I hosted a dinner party in my apartment. Michael prepared his signature pasta while I arranged flowers and set the table for 8. Jasmine arrived first, followed by Robert and Elaine. Then 2 couples from my expanding circle of friends. The apartment filled with conversation and laughter as we shared wine and stories. Looking around at these people who had entered my life after my lowest moment, I realized something profound. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through respect, kindness, and mutual support. These people sitting around my table, who had known me for less than a year, but had shown me more genuine care than my stepfamily ever had, were more family to me than Derek and Amanda had ever been. As we raised glasses in a toast Michael proposed to my business's recent success, I felt a sense of having come full circle. The betrayal that had begun with my belongings scattered across a rain-soaked lawn had ultimately led me to where I truly belonged. By losing what I thought was my only option for family, I had found the space to create something far more authentic and nurturing. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, fear, and grief along the way. But sitting there surrounded by genuine connection,